will be interested in a story of domestic struggles and joys? It doesn't have any real importance, does it?
Asks Josephine Jo March, the protagonist of the novel Little Women and alter ego of the woman who wrote it, Louisa May Alcott. Little did Jo March and her creator know that their story of domestic struggles and joys piqued the interest of Greta Gerwig, one of the most influential female voices today in the field of filmmaking. Alcott's coming-of-age novel that comprises 2 volumes, the first published in 1868 and the second in 1869, a novel that follows the story of 4 sisters from a poor family in Concord, Massachusetts, was appropriately and honestly adapted by Gerwig, not only for the screen, but also for the modern times. The Guardian has described it as one of the freshest literary adaptations when it was released in 2019. And it's mainly because of Gerwig's cinematic mastery that brought a 19th century family come to life and be experienced in a way that they're not just looking at a specific period of time, but traveling from one time to another and realizing that the past and the present doesn't have much of a difference at all. Get a bowl of your favorite chips as we dive deep into your favorite flick here in Flick and Chips. Today, we are going to talk about how Little Women is still relevant 3 centuries after it was published and how its latest adaptation emphasized its importance. You'll be warned, there'll be spoilers ahead. Do you realize how accessible cinema is today? Cinematic experience may now be as accessible as borrowing a book and reading it on the subway. The usual case, it only takes a monthly subscription fee and the whole catalog of a particular streaming service is now on your fingertips. Watching a movie, an experience likened to entering another being's consciousness, could be experienced anytime. That is why Little Women is a time machine that could take you to the 19th century even if you are now stuck in quarantine. But aside from the material conditions regarding its accessibility via Netflix, Gerwig's vision concerning how the story progresses contributes to Little Women's effectiveness in transporting us in different points of time. Gerwig's Little Women progresses in a non-linear fashion. It started by showing us the present conditions of our characters. Jo is haggling her writing to her publisher, Mr. Dashwood, who mandates that a heroine in a story must be married in the end. Meg, who took a risk to buy an expensive fabric, greeted by her 2 daughters at home, and Amy, who studies painting in Paris and has a chance encounter with their former neighbor, Laurie. After showing a present portrait of our main characters, the time is then transitioned 7 years backwards, when our main characters, who we know are living their lives separately in the present, were once living happily together. Gerwig masterfully intercuts between different times to compare and contrast how our main characters developed. For example, when Jo came back to Massachusetts to aid her sick sister Beth and asked Marmee if Amy isn't coming back from Paris, her contempt towards Amy was revealed as she misses the parts where we struggle. While this is quite true since she was pursuing her painting career in Paris with little consequence compared to Jo struggling to sell her writing, the following scene reveals how Amy burned Jo's novel in the past. Yet, even though Jo was angry at what Amy did, she still saved her life because she's her sister. The most heartbreaking use of nonlinear storytelling was seen on the eve of Beth's sickness due to both occurrence, past and present, of scarlet fever. Gerwig intentionally used both setups and shots that would lead to different outcomes. In both instances, Jo would stay for the night beside Beth, only to wake up alone. Jo would get out of bed and go downstairs to look for her younger sister. The different outcomes of similar sequences elicited different responses from the audience. In the past, we are relieved that Beth is alive and at the breakfast table. In the present, we are greeted by Marmee's grievous weeping. Gerwig's non-linear storytelling suited a 3-century-old story perfectly, as it prevented us from experiencing the film as a period drama with token nuances referring to its period, and enabled us to understand that the March sisters' life is a collection of vital events to understand the human condition in the 19th century. The way Little Women was presented to us works like any modern coming-of-age film, without the element of social media and with the customs existing in the 19th century. This urges us to ask one interesting question. Is not much difference made in the 3 centuries that have passed? How come a novel first released in 1868 is relatable now? We think that the answer lies in the themes explored initially by Louisa May Alcott in the original novel, themes that Greta Gerwig amplified in her adaptation. It is widely known that Alcott's Little Women attempted to explore the ways a woman could live her life in response to society's expectations towards her in the 19th century. These ways of living were differentiated in her four Little Women, the March sisters. Jo March, our main character, and an obvious alter ego of Alcott, is a writer willing to spend her sleepless nights in the attic writing rather than attending debutante balls to meet young men. She's a paragon for a strong, independent woman who's willing to sacrifice anything for the people who count on her. The key symbol of Jo's attitude was shown when she cut her hair to finance her mother's trip to Washington to aid their dad who came back from the war. Also, being the eldest sister in a fatherless house, Jo exhibits boyish qualities to compensate for the tough authority that is missing from their house. She tends to hide her feelings to set an example of toughness around her family. But it doesn't mean that it's easy, as she was seen weeping at the stairway after selling her hair. For most of her life, Jo believed that she needs no one in order to be happy, and sees marriage as an economic proposition. Amy is almost similar to Jo. They are both eager to pursue their career, Jo writing, Amy painting. They both see marriage as an economic proposition. Yet, unlike Jo, Amy sees it as an opportunity to be in a better position in life. You cannot blame her though. In fact, one of the early purposes of marriage as an institution in the Middle Ages acts as an alliance between families in order to combine both families' economic power. Coming from a poor family, Amy saw marriage with Fred Vaughan as a way to escape poverty, especially when she felt that she wouldn't be hailed as a genius in painting. But why would she feel that way in the first place? The answer lies the same way Jo was forced to write gory stories that she knew would sell, because it appeals to men. And at that time, art was a male-dominated field. That is where Laurie and Friedrich come into place. These two men might be symbols for men acting as an ally to women as they share the same similar qualities. They both value geniuses. Friedrich and Jo had an interesting dynamic as they converse in the role of an artist and her critic. Friedrich explicitly expressed his dislike of Jo's writing on themes he knew was untrue to her. That's why he said,
"Oh, I think you're talented." Which is why I'm being so blunt.
Nowadays, this is still relevant, and pretty sure it would hit home for creatives who force themselves to work on something they don't genuinely like. However, Jo's writing doesn't necessarily mean it's fake, as she sees it as a means to support herself and her family. As Khalil Gibran would put it, work is love made visible, and maybe art is also an economic proposition. For Amy, Laurie provided the right question when he asked her who hails the geniuses. Laurie also questioned and urged Amy to follow her heart and value what she truly feels instead of marrying Fred Vaughan for economic advantage. When Jo was confronted by Laurie's love in the past, she said,
I can't say yes truly, so I'm not going to say it at all.
But this was a different case for Meg and Beth. Beth, the youngest of the four, was content in being subservient with her family and simply playing the piano for Mr. Lawrence. But for Meg, she sees marriage as an act of love, an opportunity to start a happy and simple family. And clearly, there's nothing wrong with that. As she said to Jo,
Just because my dreams are different than yours doesn't mean they're unimportant.
but that doesn't mean it's easy, of course. As Marnie put it, in the course of 40 years, she has learned to control her anger. Alcott and Gerwig made it clear that what a woman would choose between work and marriage is completely up to her. What we love about Little Women is, no matter what or how a woman deals with society's expectations to her, the woman is not belittled. Pun intended. Little Women ended in the way it teaches women to be. Jo happily married Friedrich as she was told that her heroine should be married in the end, like what Alcott did to Jo. Jo watches her own book, Little Women, get published. When her first copy was made, she cradled it in her arms. Before pursuing to publish the novel, she was hesitant if people would be interested in the story of domestic struggles and joy. and she feels that her story isn't that important. Amy, wizened by Paris, answered that writing the story makes it important. And what obvious message does it say when Jo finally held a copy of Little Women in her arms? It's simple. Own your story. As always, that's all we could chip in for the flick we discussed today. If you loved this video, don't forget to click like. And if you want more film analysis, consider visiting and subscribing to our channel. Happy Women's Month, y'all! We hope you enjoyed your bag of chips as we discuss your favorite flick here in Flick and Chips.